Acquired immune deficiency syndrome.
No one with AIDS has been cured.
AIDS is now the leading cause of death among young people in this country.
Acquired immune deficiency syndrome is a terrifying and mysterious disease, and it's killing a lot of people.
AIDS was discovered first in young homosexual men. There is no cure, and it is often fatal. Whatever causes AIDS destroys these blood cells called lymphocytes, which fight infection. The victims are then susceptible to various diseases.
When patients downstairs to be x-rayed, people just ran off the way. They just literally ran out the way because they felt that they could get AIDS.
These doctors at Albert Einstein Medical College who treat AIDS patients and study the disease understand the reasons for the fear.
We have a disease here which is new, which was not here a decade ago, and we have no cure. And worse than that is that the mortality rate is really astronomical.
In 1981, the first cases of AIDS were identified in the U.S. 5 young, previously healthy men in Los Angeles with cases of a rare lung infection called pneumocystis pneumonia, or PCP, became sick. By year's end, the number of total cases were 337, with 130 people already dead by December 31st. By 1982, the New York Times published the first mention of the term GRID, gay-related immune deficiency, deepening the public perception that this illness only affects gay men. Later, the CDC will change that name to AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. However, the damage had already been done. By 1985, AIDS had reached the American heartland, and groups of activists had sprung up all across the country. Actor Rock Hudson had died from AIDS-related illness, leaving behind $250,000 to found the American Foundation for AIDS Research. In St. Louis, John Allen and Daniel Flier would raise $6,000 and found St. Louis Effort for AIDS.
Daniel Flier, and I am 64 years old. And I said, when did I come out? Well, it must have been when my mother brought me home from the hospital and she laid me in my crib, and I looked at the curtains and I looked at the rug and thought, what was she thinking? Because that does not go together. And I've never questioned it. I may not have always known what it was until I got a little older, and I knew I really liked girls, but not like that. Oh, that's what's going on. The first time that I realized as an adult, I was probably 18, and I went to a bar called Herbie's in St. Louis, which was the most magnificent gay bar to this day that I've ever walked in my life. It was all Art Deco, and the minute I opened the door, I looked around and I said, here they are. I knew there had to be, and it was men and women and straight people and gay people, but it was really nice. Actually, and I'm not saying this because you're here, it was kind of the same feeling I got at the Arts Asylum. It was like, everybody just doesn't really care. And that's kind of what Herbie's was. Nobody really cared if you were gay, okay. If you weren't, okay. Let's be friends.
Speaking of that, can you remember your first gay friend? Like that first?
It was that night, yeah. Well, gay friend or gay experience, because that's different.
Let's talk about both if you can. Let's talk about that first gay friend that you met that you really connected with, and then we can talk about your...
That was at Herbie's that night, and some gentleman named Dale came up and he said, I'm not coming on to you. And he started his drink and he said, but you look like you're scared to death. I said, I'm a little taken back. And he said, well, let's get a cocktail, honey. And I said, well, I'm only 18. He said, even better. Let's get a cocktail. And he said, and I'll show you around. And we became the best of the best. When COVID first hit, and there was that stigma, it was like when AIDS first hit, there was that stigma. And I think the stigma with AIDS was a little different in the early days because it was gay disease, or so it was said it was a gay disease, and COVID was airborne. AIDS is a little more intimate of a situation to get it. COVID, not so much. And I remember when I did my early work with St. Louis Center for AIDS, talking to the doctors and them saying, let's just hope this does not manifest into something airborne. And bada bing, bada bang. Oh, too many people. Yeah. In 1 year, no, in 2 years' time, I lost, and this is gonna sound extreme, and it's the truth, 34 friends, not acquaintances, friends who I knew, including the gentleman Val that I met at Herbie's my first night out, who was my BFF. He was one of the first. I don't know if you're gonna ask, are you gonna ask me about St. Louis Center for AIDS?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I didn't know if you wanted me to talk now about it.
Go ahead, yeah.
When I started St. Louis Effort for AIDS, it was because of this guy named Eddie. And Eddie Bavinglow, and I can say his name because I know I can. He came home from Texas, and his sister Jo called and she said, Eddie wants to know if you'll cut his hair. This man was GQ model, drop dead gorgeous. He moved away to Texas to model. And she said, Eddie wants to know if you'll cut his hair. And I'm like, yeah. I've cut it for years. And she said, well, it has to be at night and nobody can be there. And he wants you to wear a gown and gloves and a mask. And I said, why? And she said, he's really sick, Daniel. I said, sick with what? She said, well, sick with what they told him is GRID, which is gay-related immune deficiency. And I didn't know anything of it. Well, he got to the shop and he looked like a science fiction freak. He had Kaposi's all over his face and herpes, and he was just an open sore. And I'll never forget it. He looked at me and he said, you don't have to touch me if you don't want to. And I said, don't be ridiculous. And I said, Eddie, what's going on? And he said, the only thing I can tell you, sweetie, is it's sexually transmitted. He said, and in Texas, it's insane. So I pulled myself together and I cut his hair, and he died 2 days later. And so that's how St. Louis Effort for AIDS was born. And then each week, like, more people showed up. And after it was in existence for about 6 months, we had an actual election. And then I was still elected vice president, which I was fine with. And then after that, I just kind of said, I don't want to. I'll get on a microphone, I'll raise money, I'll do whatever. Because we were doing it all. I mean, we were going to hospital. I was holding people's hands who were dying, who I didn't know. And hospitals were, and partially I understand, hospitals were not helping people because they were afraid. And I would go, I think my most impactful story is a little kid named Kevin. And I went to Kevin's room and his meal was laying in the hallway. Sorry. And I said to the nurse, has he eaten? And she said, and I said, what do you mean you don't know? And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, could you get him a fresh tray and I'll take it into him? And she said, you don't want to go in there. And I said, you're right. I don't want to go in there, but I'm going to. And I went in there and I brought in some fresh food to this kid. And I was all gowned up, and most impactful words of all of the years that I worked doing what I did. He said, who are you? And I said, it's not real important. And I said, can I sit on your bed? And he said, aren't you afraid of me? And I said, absolutely not. And I said, I'm afraid of the disease you have, but I'm not afraid of you. And I said, Kevin, who can we call for you? And he said, my mom and dad disowned me for being gay. You're not going to come around for this. And I said, there's no one? And he said, I have a grandmother in Cape Girardeau. And I asked for the number, and I called her, and that lady listened to me, and she said, I'll be there. And she took Kevin home to die, and he didn't live too many days after that. But that, and then trying to balance the running of EFA and the money, and it was just entirely, obviously it's been 30-something years ago, and it's still an emotional drain on me. It was just too emotional. Guilt. I don't know if that's quite the same thing, but I suffered for many years of thinking, because I was certainly no angel. We won't get into my sexual history, but I was not an angel. And I would think, what did I do differently? What happened differently with me? And why not me? And why are all my beautiful friends who I love, who I know we were in the same circles, how did I not get sick and die? And she said, because maybe you weren't supposed to. And maybe your job is bigger than all that, and you're doing it.
Well, I'm glad you're here to share that story.
I'm glad I'm here. Well, I think you have people who were there, who lived through it, who can tell them that I lost 34 friends. And just like COVID, I'll wrap it back around to that, you think it's not real until somebody you know dies, and then it becomes very real. You know, and when people would start, I mean, they were dropping dead. And we were all like, what do you mean? You know, when people started dropping dead around us, it becomes very real and very surreal all at the same time. And you have an understanding of, I had such an understanding of death at an early age that it was very impactful. And just like COVID, some people are being taught now, you know, life is fragile, and a lot more fragile than what you think. And I guess through education and through stories and through learning and through the ability to say, hey, I was there,